You're gonna, yeah, it's pretty good, I guess. That's fine. I don't know. Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Ganer Cooks. Today's episode, we're going to be making an Italian-style chicken meatball soup. If you're feeling a little under the weather, you don't really want to prepare some labor-intensive meal, and that's exactly what today's meal is all about. Keeping it really, really simple and really, really comforting. The ingredients we're going to be using for this soup is we're going to need some nice vegetables. We're going to have mushrooms, spinach, garlic, and a couple of onions. The onions at the store were a little small, so I got 2 this time around. But if you have a nice big onion, 1 will do just fine. You're also gonna want a can of diced tomatoes. This particular can has no salt added, but you use whatever's in your cupboard right now. We're also going to have a grain in this soup, and the grain that I'm going with is going to be farro, or I don't know how you pronounce that. You could use any number of grains. What we will frequently use is pearl barley, but they didn't have that in the store this time around, so we went with a different kind of grain. Your soup is only going to be as good as the seasonings that you're putting in it. We're going to use crushed red pepper, Italian seasoning, salt, pepper, and I'm going to add some herbs from our garden. I have oregano here, and I also am going to have parsley. But again, like anything that I make, if you only have the stuff in a jar, you can use jarred oregano. There's going to be oregano in my Italian seasoning anyway. That's just what I had lying around. Anything like oregano, basil, parsley, any of those things will go really, really great in this soup. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to use in terms of the meatballs that we're going with this time around. We're going to go with a chicken meatball because I think it's a little bit leaner, a little bit healthier than something like using Italian sausage to make your meatballs. But we've had a lot of success with this particular soup using the ground Beyond Meat stuff. I probably would have gone with that option, but they didn't have it in the store this time around. So we're going with ground chicken. But we need to have a little bit of an Italian kind of addition to those meatballs. And what I'm going to use is traditional breadcrumbs, 1 egg, and I'm also going to use some kind of hard cheese, like a Parmesan cheese or Asiago cheese would be just as great. We need a pot. You want something that's big enough to have a fair amount of soup, because remember, you can always freeze the soup for later. So we're going to use a gumbo pot this time around. You're also going to need a pan. We're going to bake our meatballs. There's other ways of doing it, of course, but for me, it's less greasy if we bake the meatball, so you need a baking pan. And finally, we need a bowl, some kind of simple bowl to mix the meatballs together. So the first step that we're going to be taking is we're going to mix up all the ingredients we need to make our chicken meatballs. Okay, the ground chicken looks kind of not great. The ground chicken is not the prettiest thing to look at, so we're not going to do a super close-up of everything, but I am going to add about 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs. It's going to help it come together a little bit. Then I'm going to add 1 egg into this. I'm going to wash my hands. Now I'm going to add about a tablespoon or more of your Italian seasoning. I'm going to add some red pepper. Like that. I'm going to add some black pepper. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. You don't want to put a lot of salt. Literally about maybe half a teaspoon or less. The reason why you don't need to really over salt this is because guess what? I'm about to throw in some Parmesan cheese, and Parmesan cheese is a really, really salty, delicious thing. The Parmesan is also going to help us bind the chicken meatball together. So I'm going to add about half a cup of Parmesan cheese. Then I'm going to preheat my oven to 400 degrees. While we're doing that, while it's heating up, I'm going to start making the meatballs. Carrie noticed that I stuck my hands in this and I didn't take off my wedding ring. Fair enough. Whenever you're making meatballs, you don't want them to be so dense and tightly packed together. I prefer to have an airier, fluffier kind of meatball. So I'm not going to try to make this as tightly, densely packed as maybe some other kinds of meatballs. But I am going to just gently fold all of the ingredients into the mixture just so that everything is mixed well, evenly throughout. And then I'm going to start creating my meatballs. I'm also not going to make these balls very big. There's no way to say balls. Okay. I'm not going to make these chicken meatballs very big. The reason why is because these are going to be going in a soup, not something like going on top of a pasta. You don't really want necessarily a big old chunk of meatball trying to sip on some soup. So these meatballs are going to be deliberately a little bit smaller than you might typically do in pasta. I've got the meatballs prepared on a baking sheet that before I added the meatballs to it, I definitely lightly coated it in cooking spray or something like that. You'll notice that the meatballs are kind of evenly spaced out. You want to give them enough room. The next step is I'm just going to put these in the oven at 400 degrees for roughly 20 minutes. Now that our meatballs are in the oven, we have a little bit of time to cut up our vegetables and get started with the soup. This is going to be a really simple cut here for these onions. We're just going to julienne the onions. So I usually start by cutting them in half, and then I'm just going to thinly slice the onions. My eyes are kind of burning. These must be some potent onions. So once I can see again, I'm going to start cutting up the mushrooms. Some folks I've seen will rip the stem out of the mushroom like this, and then cut them that way. It's a little bit easier if you cut the stem off because then boom, it lays flat and you can easily slice the mushroom that way. I like the taste of my stem, so I'm gonna leave mine on as I cut these mushrooms. I also like the kind of look of them, but what we're looking for here is we're going to be just thinly slicing all these mushrooms. The most important thing is that you've thoroughly washed the mushrooms so there's no dirt on your stem if you're going to leave the stem on. Now we've got all of our vegetables chopped up and ready to go. We're going to add about a tablespoon or so of olive oil. You can use extra virgin olive oil, but you can also use coconut oil. Any oil that you have around your house is totally fine to use, but we're going to use about a tablespoon of that. We're going to get this hot at about medium high, and then we're just going to add the vegetables in one at a time. We're going to start with our onions, and we're going to be cooking these down until they become translucent. We're not trying to brown them or caramelize the onions. We're just trying to get them a little sweated out to bring out the flavor of the onion. Now that our onions are starting to get nice and translucent, we're going to start throwing in the mushrooms. You can add as little or as many mushrooms as you like. But we're going to try to cook these mushrooms down into our onions just a little bit. So after our mushrooms have cooked down just a little bit, we're going to throw in our garlic. We want those flavors incorporated for just about 30-45 seconds, not very long, because we don't want our garlic to start burning at the bottom of the pot. So now we're going to add our diced tomatoes. We'll let those flavors incorporate just a little bit. So now that our tomatoes, our mushrooms, and onions are cooking and coming together, we're going to start adding in herbs to taste. I'm going to start by pulling off these oregano leaves, and then I'm going to chop them up. If you were using dried oregano, you'd use about a tablespoon. Because the leaves are going to be a little stronger, I'm not going to use that much in ours. So I'm going to use about half a tablespoon. See, if I pulled it out of a jar, you wouldn't have to do all this, so sucks to be me. I'm going to add this oregano into our pot. But I'm also going to begin chopping up my Italian parsley, and then I'm just going to throw that in the pot as well. Now it's time to add the broth. This would be a really, really awesome soup if you made your own. I didn't, and we didn't have any room for our freezer, even if I did. So this is some mixed up chicken broth that you can get in the powdered form. and I'm just throwing that in there. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add our grain to our soup. I'm gonna add about a cup of the farro to this soup. I'm gonna take this up to get it boiling. And once it starts boiling, I'm gonna turn down the heat of this soup so that it just simmers until the farro is cooked all the way through. All right, so I just took the meatballs out of the oven. They look so nice and golden on the tops, and I know they're gonna be browned a little bit more than that on the bottom, but I'm gonna throw these meatballs into our soup. So our soup is cooked through. The chicken has had the chance to get incorporated with the soup. The last thing you put in is the spinach. It doesn't take very long at all for spinach to cook through, so I do want to make sure that I'm saving that for probably the last ingredient. So our farro is cooked through, and that means this soup is done. And with that, we're ready to serve.
All right, now go.
Nice and cheesy.
Yeah, get it real cheesy.
If you're feeling a little under the weather, this is the perfect meal for you. I hope you enjoy this soup. Sorry. I know that Carrie and I will. Right about now, it's really, really important that everybody is staying home. Making meals like this, it can be so simple as just throwing a few ingredients into a pot, and then on the other side of that is going to be a really restorative and wonderful soup for you and your family to enjoy. So everybody, stay home and stay healthy.
It's great sound.
Yeah.
Great audio.
Yeah,